Seppin was 29 when he finally saved enough to travel to Alaska. His dad had been telling him stories of Alaska since he was a boy. When he was 8, he went to Mount Rainier with his family, and his dad walked him all the way to the edge of the Muir snowfields. He was exhausted, even though his dad carried him much of the distance through the garden pass, until they finally reached the snow where he was made to walk. After a while, the glacier came up on the left, appearing like a white and blue cliff at first. He was too busy huffing and puffing, trying to keep up with his dad, to take a real look at it. When they finally stopped, he looked up and saw how it cut through the snow like a beached ship. His dad pointed to it and said, "Soon, these will be gone, kid. The glaciers are melting." He peered at it like it was an old friend. Seppin loved watching his dad's timeless smirk as he lovingly adored the ice. His dad turned to another passerby. The Muir snowfields are really crowded. People like to hike up to base camp. They like to hike even just halfway and just gaze at the glacier. So he stopped somebody and asked them, and the two took a picture together. Seppin cherished that picture. After a pause, where neither of them spoke, his dad finally continued. He's like, "Some idiots are going to tell you that it's global warming, but this is just the cycling of the earth, kid. Things change, buddy. We have a rare opportunity to see the most awesome and beautiful sight of our time." Seppin could feel the cold emanating from the glacier, though they were a good 50 yards away. It felt like being near the ocean on a brisk morning, except there was something different about it, something more personal. To Seppin, the ocean is like seeing a vast and beautiful but foreign entity, something to visit, but never really connect to. The glaciers, however, were like visiting a home he left behind years ago. He inherited his dad's passion and love of glaciers. Later that night, his dad kept talking about Alaska. He told of the glaciers near Cordova. Sheridan Glacier has an ice cave under it, and his dad went on and on about it. He's like, "It's probably not there anymore because that's the thing with glaciers. They're always changing, they're always moving, they're always melting." His dad said the ice was like a cavern for hundreds of yards, and at times you could hear loud cracks underneath it when the glacier shifted. "There's barely anything left of Sheridan now, I'm positive," his dad said. He took out his phone and he showed the pictures of the glacier from underneath. Seppin thought it was so cool that his dad was underneath a glacier, especially one that is probably gone now. Seppin was exploring Root Glacier at 29 years old. He had signed up for a Mount Bona expedition, which would take roughly 3 weeks in one of the most remote places on the planet. But he arrived a week early just to go exploring in the Kennecott Valley and wherever else he could get to before his climb. Alaska was as beautiful as his dad described, even more so than every book he'd ever read about it or seen pictures. Every step he took invigorated him, and he decided on that day, his 3rd day there, his first day in the real wilderness, that he was going to live there. He took a day to travel to Juneau before heading into the wilderness, and then it took a day to travel, of course, so it wasn't until that 3rd day that he actually got out in the woods. And he couldn't decide, maybe I'll move to Juneau and just go out climbing and hiking when I can, but I am going to live here one way or another. He mused over it as he walked, meandering about the woods, making his way to the glacier. He would talk out loud to himself about the work he'd find. He's like, "I don't really care what it is. I'll do whatever it takes to live here. I'll be a handyman. I'll work on fishing. I'll do anything. It doesn't even matter because work is not what makes me happy. This is what makes me happy." He checked his watch, and he'd already traveled 10 miles into the valley, hopping creeks, wading through bush, finding small patches of snow until finally, as he went up, he found the ice. He meandered the edge of the ice, following along the side in the wooded brush for a while. He took out his Olympus camera, the camera of the outdoorsman, he said in his head, with a smile at the great marketing ad that persuaded him to buy it, and he began snapping pictures of both the ice and the woods. Everything was beautiful. The rugged ruts in the land under his feet that bridged the two worlds, woods and ice, was tough to stand on. It was tough to walk through. the scars of the glacier that had receded inward to form just this massive blade cutting its way through the woods still. Seppin zoomed in on a juvenile eagle that landed about 100 yards away. He zeroed his telephoto lens on it, the dirty white and brown feathers fluttering while it celebrates whatever kill it just made. Seppin could not make it out. He heard a crack, and he turned with the most excited smile. His first glacier crack? He thought how weird it is to hear it so far away from the middle. He'd always envisioned himself having to be deep in the glacier, or at least on it, to hear a crack like that. His dad certainly gave the impression that he needed to be inside the glacier to hear these. But he looked back towards the eagle, and it too had its head perked up, to Seppin's surprise, watching the same spot he had just looked at. Seppin looked back at the glacier now, and he heard more noises. It was a clawing sound. The loudest clawing sound he'd ever heard, almost like a massive cat scratching at the ice. He heard a swoosh, and then looked back towards the eagle, only to see it flying away, its beautiful, dirty, white, brown feathers glinting in the fading sun. A chill ran down his spine. A shiver ran up from his butt, up his spine. It was a weird sensation. It was like the shiver going down was cold, and the shiver going up was hot, and it reminded him of being sick. He didn't know what to think. Seppin was scared. An unusual fear came out of nowhere, but he refused to admit it. Instead, he put down his pack, sat on it, and held his camera in wait. Okay, let's see what this is. He took a few steadying breaths, thinking of his dad and waiting with the zoom perfectly focused on the spot where the clawing noise is coming from. Moments later, the sound began to rumble. Not like an earthquake, just a subtle vibration that gave him a tickle feeling, like someone is lightly scratching his back. The vibration was in sync with the sound, the clawing sound, and the tickling was in sync with his body, almost flowing from his butt again, up his spine to his head. It was like a perfectly written song, a symphony of sensation. It was hard to stay awake. His eyes grew heavy. The feeling was rocking him into a state of sleep, almost like a language, he thought, talking to his body. And he felt completely relaxed, but he would shake his head, trying not to fall asleep. He checked his watch, but it was all scrambled. He's like, what the hell? I just bought this watch. He put his camera down because if he passes out, he did not want to break that camera. Turns out, he made the right call, because with one last heavy eyelid, that one that usually precedes sleep, he passed right out, heavy, his body slamming against the ground, unable to control itself. When Seppin awoke, he was bewildered. The sun had set, probably a long time ago from the way he was feeling, freezing. He tried to check his watch, but it was blank, like it was dead. A massive chill just seized his body. He realized his toes were so cold that he didn't want to stand. Grabbing his pack, he quickly looked through his survival cache, pulling out the tinfoil blanket first that he wrapped around himself. Still shivering uncontrollably, he crawled into the woods a little bit, he was already on the edge of. The blood in his body was beginning to flow now, warming him slightly. So he deposited as many logs as he could into his bag, packing it full of twigs and whatever else dry he could find. And then he marched back over a little bit back into the open, dug a hole with his ice axe, put the twigs in first, reached in his pack, grabbed a fire starter bundle, shoved it between the twigs, and then used his flint to start that. The logs he then piled on after the kindling caught, and he felt better. Fire always makes you feel better, though he was dreading having to take his boots off to see his toes. It is easy to catch frostbite out in the Alaskan wilderness, especially if you don't take care of yourself, and Seppin knew this. He was not unprepared. He just, for whatever reason, that rumbling sound, that feeling, he just passed right out. He wasn't terribly worried that he had frostbite because he was careful when he picked out his gear. His La Sportiva boots he was proud of. They cost about $700. And as he carefully unlaced his yellow and black boots, he felt the ground vibrate again. His heart raced. Oh no, my feet aren't even dry yet. The clawing sound grew in a deep, rhythmic way. Slower, but deeper than last time. It felt like he was being encased in the vibration. And he was worried he would pass out again and freeze to death this time. He quickly reasoned that he probably wouldn't die, but it would drastically inhibit his ability to get the heck out of there. A green light peered out through a crevasse, coming upward exactly where the clawing sound is coming from. He gulped the cold night's air in pure awe. Dropping his laces, he sat, stilled by the bone-freezing vibrations, and his mind usurped by the majestic green emanating from the glacier. It swirled out, wave-like, an ocean of curious horror slowly swelling towards him. He wanted to reach for the picture of him and his dad that he kept. It was the one of them on Mount Rainier, the happiest memory of his life, but he couldn't move. The green came up to his face, up to the fire, and stopped. It folded itself up like a cobra, preparing to strike. And then it spread like wings. Seppin wanted to close his eyes to avoid seeing this. He didn't even want to look at it. So he wanted to focus on his dad, but he couldn't even do that. He could only sit still, staring at this entity. He even wanted to cry, but his mouth, nose, and eyes went dry, like the water was being drained from his body. His muscles began to cramp, furthering the theory of severe dehydration. Seppin felt his cheeks being sunken in. His eyes were being squeezed. And then a horn went off in the distance. Not even too far. But in that split second, the green vanished, leaving a wave of air fluttering the fire. Don pushed the button on his air horn as he marched towards the fire. He tried every channel on his sat phone and radio, but no answer. They must be getting coffee. He was patrolling the area as was his job, and this is a fire-free zone, so he grew angrier and angrier with every step. Stupid tourists. Don was a forest ranger, but recently took a job with the national park to make sure hikers and tourists don't get hurt. Don could walk fast as anyone in the woods. He grew up in Alaska, and it was his life's honor to work and protect the land. He could see the dancing of flames now, instead of just the glow, which means he's coming up on the site. He carries a 4.44 lever action rifle on the outside of his pack, something big enough to stop a bear, but he rarely feels the need to take it out when it comes to people. There are some sketchy people in Alaska, but most of them want to avoid high-profile altercations and be left alone. Plus, no one savvy in the woods would have a fire this large on the edge of a glacier and feel like they can get away with it. So Don felt comfortable it's just a novice woodsman too far out of their knowledge base. The slight dips and rivets in the land let Don know he was getting closer to the glacier. You know, the places where the ice used to be, carving its path before it melted away. Don hated these. Scars of something past is never easy to traverse. He finally started up the last knoll, and he knew the flames were on the other side because he could see the orange dancing in front of him. And he bellowed out, "Ho! Ranger Don here. Don't be alarmed." He crested the little hill to find the fire blazing. After a quick survey, he surmised there was no one in the immediate vicinity, which made him more on guard, so he took his pack off. "Ho! Ranger Don here. Anyone?" He took a look at the fire and was happy to see it was well made. You know, it was dug in a hole. Probably going to be dying off soon as there was no new fuel for it. A pack lay 5 yards to his right, around the fire a little bit, but nothing else. He screamed, "Hello? Anyone here?" As he walked around the fire, he made larger circles, concentric circles, and he walked and walked, trying to find clues. He saw a little gun laying over to the left. Again, very curious that someone would leave their pack and weapon here in the middle of the night and scurry off. It gave him a sinking feeling in his stomach. He saw scattered dirt like the land had been raked with a metal rake. But he only saw the pack, so he picked it up. Under it was an expensive Olympus camera. Don flipped it on and browsed the pictures, but nothing unusual. He put the camera in the pack and rummaged around. In the front pocket, there was a photo in laminate. A man and a little boy. Oh, I think that's Mount Rainier, Don said to himself. It made Don sad to look at it. Panic set in now. His heart raced. Man, who would leave their stuff here like this? This is not typical. He took a deep breath, putting the picture carefully back into the pack. The pack was well put together. Everything was in good working order. It was packed like someone knew what they were doing. Maybe not a novice. How the hell did you just disappear? Maybe he's taking a shit, Don said to himself. Hello, Don yelled again. He listened carefully this time, trying to hear a twig break or leaves rustling or any signs of human interaction. He feared the worst as he looked up and gazed towards the glacier. Took a deep breath. Nothing. He sat the pack down on the ground as he realized the gun was still laying about 3 yards away to the left, and said again, shit. No one goes off alone without their gun, not in Alaska. Don took out his sat phone immediately, dialed the number to his base, took his 444 off his pack and held it. Hey, Don, what's up? A reply came. Guys, I got a fresh fire in someone's full pack and no person in sight. I called out several times, made concentric circles, and I can't find them. There's not even any tracks. We might have a situation here. That's pretty sketchy, brother. But if you feel up to it, you can stick around, Don, for a while. Maybe they'll come back. Yep, will do. I don't mind. Over. Don hung up the phone and sat on the ground, not far from where he found the pack. The fire started to die down, and he decided to just keep it going since it was well made. Threw a log on, looked at the pack again. Something didn't feel right. The hair on his neck was prickly, which is Don's tell that something is off. The air smelled crisp like he loves. The fire was warm. It just didn't seem right that this person would be so far from their camp at night without their tools. Even a novice knows that Alaska is a dangerous place, and yet Don didn't feel like he was in danger, just that something weird is happening here. He must have gone on the ice. Idiot, Don thought. Don looked towards the fire as a chill began to creep from his butt to his neck. What the? It was unusual the way the chill began to lightly vibrate his spine. He put his hands on the ground so he can feel if there was something going on. And he did. He felt a sensation, like a vibration. The hair on his entire body stood up in an instant. And Don, without thinking, got up, grabbing the man's pack all in one motion as he stood up and darted towards his original location. He felt his eyes going heavy, but he pushed on. The shiver in his spine felt like language, like it was enticing him to go to sleep. Don pushed on. He picked up his pace, tripping but not falling over the rivets in the ground, and he pushed and he pushed and he pushed until finally he thought he cleared the glacier because he only see emptiness on his left, where the soot fields of melted glacier would be in the light. He felt the shiver start to subside and the heaviness in his eyelids recede. He didn't stop, though. He got to his camp and just started packing up. He wanted to get to base as fast as he could, which was 16 miles away. He didn't care. He would rather traverse the wilderness in the dark than stay there another minute. He didn't look back once, trusting the hairs on his body, trusting his gut. He breathed with a purpose, completely focused on the task at hand. It only took him a matter of 10 minutes to pack up his camp, and he marched on. The entire walk home, Don did not look back. He was considering not saying anything to anyone, and then he was considering telling everyone, having them look at him like he was crazy. He didn't know what to do. He only knew that he could not look back. He knew that he had to get to base. And eventually, that night, he did get to base. He opened the door, and he saw his friend Jim there, sitting with the sat phone, waiting around, as was Jim's job that night. And Don looked at Jim, took a deep breath, still clutching the man's pack in his right hand, and he told him what he felt.